Well, it looks like they're getting their money. What do you know? Anyway, let me get back to this. So where were we? I was talking about my history, working at the college, choosing a new student assistant, and what I would do. Now, obviously, no one really looks forward to work, but I have to admit that working at the college was rather interesting. And I think it was kind of a unique time because I was not able to get a job in the field that I studied, but I was able to continue to be around people that were teaching this. Okay. If somebody's having a business deal on the phone here. All right, we'll pop this in here and we're good to go. Okay. Now, get this bicycle out of here. Anyway, handlebar's falling off. So, once I picked this person, he was a student assistant and definitely was a pleasure to work with, to be around, very interesting, studying engineering, asking me questions, but he was also into bodybuilding and fitness modeling, which I thought was really interesting. Now, the kind of work that he did, there were some catalogs and there was some, there was other art projects, and I know that he was being paid to model for some of these art studios, so he did a lot of different things. But obviously, like most bodybuilders, didn't have a lot of money and therefore needed assistance to go to college. Now, his dad was an engineer, so he decided, well, he'd become an engineer as well. Obviously, his dad grew up in the post-war period, baby boomers, whatever, so their opportunities were much better than we had, Generation X or Millennial. Now, he's born in 1974, so I guess that's still Generation X. Anyway, so as we talked about different subjects, one of the things that he had mentioned to me was that, at my age, and I was, 26, 25? I was 25 at the time. And I always mentioned my desire to put on muscle mass and get bigger. And I didn't really care if I gained a little fat with it. So the idea was pretty simple. Now for him, he ate a bodybuilding diet. And the bodybuilding diet was basically lean meats and then things like rice and pasta and all these carbohydrate foods. Now, obviously, that wasn't something that I was interested in at all. I hate that stuff. I call it duck food. And I called it duck food back then. So it was kind of disheartening to me to think that if I wanted to get that great body that I was looking for, I would have to eat foods that I hate. And that is a problem. So anyway, the other subject that was mentioned, of course, is that using a little chemical enhancement is necessary, especially for someone who has so little muscle mass like me, and as he puts it out, is just stretched out, being as tall as I am. The only way that I would ever put on any kind of significant muscle mass would be to use these products, which would require injections in certain muscle groups, if you know what I mean. Now again, I'm not opposed to that. I think that is actually a valid therapy for many people. But I didn't have that kind of money, and I didn't want to take the chance. So I decided the best thing that I could do would be to just do what I'm doing and forget about it. I was more interested in trying to find a good career, whether that's a job or start a business. But we continue to talk about it on a regular basis, and I have to admit, I learned a lot. He would show me different workout ideas, so on. What I started doing, I started gathering plates, bars, a bench, and eventually I even got a hold of some equipment. I took the back part of my parents' house and actually built a home gym. So I tried a bit of workouts and didn't have any progress whatsoever. And again, I kind of blamed it on my diet. So the idea was, eat that stuff. Now, you have to realize that a few months before that, I had tried the plant-based diet, and I had destroyed myself. I felt like total crap. I was not a happy person. So the thought of having to change my diet again just did not appeal to me. So I refused to do so. Now, with that being said, I decided I would just talk about it and not really do anything. And that, of course, is what I did. I guess I still kind of do it to this day. So anyway, now, he was a student assistant there from the summer of 93 until 1995, when he had completed his college degree. And I think he was in his last term. He had already been approved for financing, didn't need the job anymore. So he left. And I thought I would never see him again. I had his phone number, but the thing was this. Back then, when I wanted to call him, cell phones were not that common. Now, I had one for my work, but what he did, he had a beeper. And I would call the beeper number, I would leave, my number using a touch-tone phone, and then he would call me back. Well, shortly after that, it was probably, 2-3 months, I hadn't called him, I hadn't heard from him. Figured out he's busy, whatever. So I go to call his beeper number, and I leave them my number, and somebody calls back. But it wasn't him. Thinking, that's weird. I must have dialed the wrong number. So I did it again. And guess what? Same person called me back. I said, yeah, I do this all the time. Hit the beeper number. But it turned out that person had just gotten that beeper number like a week or so before that. So I completely lost contact with him. Now I knew he lived with his parents in Coral Gables. I didn't know where he lived. And I remember looking around. Now, when I was working, I would sometimes work in that area. And he's one of those people that, he's unique, but he's not that unique. He's not like me. There's only one Rick. I've never met anybody in the world that even looks remotely close to me. But him, there's a lot of people that look like him. Well, I guess it depends on where you are. Blonde hair, blue eyes, great shape. Looks like a movie star from the 1950s. Sort of like a beefed up Tab Hunter kind of guy. Intelligent, talented, great voice. You don't see too many people like that. But I didn't see him. So for years and years, 96, 97, and into 98, I forgot about him. It's like, well, for a couple of years after he left college, I kind of remembered him. Now, 95 was also the year that I got into business with a couple of friends of mine. We were doing networking, computer servers, and stuff like that. And I still did work occasionally part-time at the college as a substitute teacher. And I even did some tutoring. But really, when it came down to it, I was working mostly in our business. Well, I wasn't living with my parents at the time, living somewhere else, about more than an hour away. And every now and then I come to my parents, stay there. If I worked at the college, I might stay there. Then what happened, sometimes as a reward to me, a lot of times my parents would run into problems, they needed some help, they call me up, say, Rick, your dad has to get this done or that done, or there's things that need to be fixed, and I go there. But what eventually happened was this. As a reward, they tried to make me something to eat, but obviously my mom didn't like working with meat. So as a compromise, we go out to eat. Now, one place we went to was called Duff's Smorgasbord, or Duff's Buffet, but it was up in Broward County. And they later changed the name to Stacy's Buffet. The other one was the Chinese Food Garden, which was not that far from here. And there was another place, I don't remember the name of it, it was another one of those buffets. So we would go to the buffet, and the Chinese Food Garden is across the street, or was across the street, from Great Value and the Publix. So we went to there afterwards. A lot of times my mom would go to Publix. She liked to get bread and fruits and vegetables and all that stuff. And I was bored out of my mind. The other thing they loved was peanut butter, because my parents didn't like to eat a lot of meat. Peanut butter was one of their main sources of fat and protein. And we'd have to wait. Now, a lot of times they would grind the peanut butter in the deli, because I learned when I was a kid, the peanut butter, the Skippy, the Jif, and all that was disgusting. And when I told my dad that it had sugar in it, he was like, oh, I'm not going to eat that. So my dad started eating the same peanut butter that I did when I was younger. Well, over time, that peanut butter became sort of our go-to. One thing they would do, they would buy a small machine to grind up the peanut butter. But that takes a lot of work. And it was a little salted machine, and I actually found part of it when I was cleaning up. It finally burned out. But going to Publix, getting it for like $1.50 a pound or whatever it was a good alternative. And I have to admit, even though I don't like peanuts because they give me diarrhea, the only peanut butter that ever tasted good to me was the stuff that was ground, not the stuff from the store. The other stuff from the store was all creamy. It reminded me of axle grease. It's terrible. So anyway, we had to wait, because when we went there, they were out of peanut butter. And a lot of times they would only grind a little bit. Well, then what they had said is somebody had bought all the peanut butter. So we had to wait to get it ground. So I'm there with my dad. My dad says, I'm going to look at pita bread and try to get some wheat germ. So I'm waiting over there at the deli. And somebody taps on my back, on my shoulder. Like, what is this? Rick, how are you? And I turn around and I see this guy with really tight muscle shirt and looked like somebody from the WWF, huge muscles. Thinking, who in the world is this? Rick. So he doesn't tell me his name. I don't know who he is. I'm talking to him. Are you still working at the college? I said, yeah, I'm sometimes there part-time. He says, you haven't changed at all. You look the same. Who the heck is this? So I'm thinking back, and then finally it comes to me. So I say his name. Like, yeah. Then he gives me a big hug, which I don't like getting close to people, so that was kind of shocking. But hey, at least I hadn't seen him in a while. And he tells me, I've been trying to call you, but I lost your number. What? So I tried to call you, but somebody else had your number. Oh yeah, when I got my degree, tried to get a job, ended up working as a trainer, eventually got another phone number. So he had gotten a cell phone and wasn't using the beeper anymore. Well, anyway, that was a shock. And that was in November, because I remember it was about the time that they were marking down pumpkin pies, which my mom used to love to eat. So I remember that. And, you know, after all this time, we were playing catch up. Well, my dad finally came back, and it turns out that my friend had bought all the peanut butter because he was eating it himself as part of his diet. So they got to talking. Well, eventually, what happened was this. We exchanged phone numbers and we reestablished contact. Now, I wasn't in a hurry to call him back. I didn't want to look like I was crazy or anything. So I let it go for about a week, and then I called him. Want to hang out? Okay. So he went to my parents' house where I was at, and we started talking. And, he had seen that I had done that home gym project, and it was all kind of just full of parts. I had a bunch of fenders and doors and stuff stuffed in there for my car that I was working on. So he came up with this idea, Well, anyway, talking about working out, giving me some advice. And then he had mentioned something interesting to me. He says, well, Rick, you're one of the few people I know that doesn't seem to change much. You haven't gotten fat, and yet you don't exercise. Are you still eating that caveman diet? Like, yeah, I'm still eating meat. Yeah. Well, how's your cholesterol? How's this? Well, it's been a couple of years since I've been to the doctor. The doctor told me that I was going to get a heart attack, and I told him that I thought he was fat, and I wasn't going to listen to him. So basically, I didn't go anymore. So we got to talking, and we became friends again. And from then on, a week didn't go by without us talking on the phone or hanging out. And I thought that was pretty good. In fact, we were spending so much time together, my mom and dad, they seemed to be concerned. One time they said, well, you guys talk on the phone so much, you should get married. What kind of comment is that? That's crazy. I should have given my mom a heart attack and said, yeah, let's do it. But no, you know how that works. Anyway, we were pretty much talking about different things. And one of the things that he was interested in was investing, because at the time I had been dabbling